Welcome to episode 186. That's me. That's badass. That caught me by surprise.
You paused, and I thought you were done. So
No, that's perfect. Yeah, I was just saying that's one away from killing a cop. So, right, because 187.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Anyhow,
not up to speed on my police radio lingo. So
I literally only knew that from hip hop in the 90s. It's also like a really nice tone of red, kind of blood red, which is kind of interesting. So if you want to be a hardcore designer, you can be like, I got 187 coursing through my veins, right? Solid coated Pantones.
Yeah.
All right. So with the Pantone jokes and the old 90s hip hop references out of the way, should we jump into the art check?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's rock and roll.
Okay. So do you want to start with your progress?
Sure. I just have to figure out how to get this sharing thing out. Okay. I think I can do this. Okay. So this is what I have accomplished. So I finished the last page of Quarterly Stories. I scanned it, inked it, posted it to my site, and now I'm in the process of kind of trying to figure out the next step. And that would be thumbnailing. So I did fall a little short of my goal. My goal was to have it thumbnailed, but I still feel pretty accomplished. So yeah.
Okay, wait. What do you mean by thumbnailing?
So I have like, let me see if I can pull up these. I wonder if this will work under the same screen share.
You're thumbnailing the next page, or this is the last page?
This is the last page.
Okay.
So it's the last page. So I have finished it. I have these mini covers. Let me see if I can pull one up, or maybe two up. Will these work? No, they won't. Let me see. I'm going to try to share these too. Application window. There we go. Okay. So I have these like faux covers.
Right.
Like these two. And so I need to make a third. So that's what I need to thumbnail next, is what this will be for this last sequence of chapters. And then I need to start working at an author page and stuff. So those are basically the last things. My goal for today was to have finished, and I came a little short of it because I finished, but I was hoping to thumbnail too, and I didn't. So,
gotcha.
Yeah. So
I just want to
shame and chastisement is very due my way.
But just pause for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
You finished the last page of a 5-year project.
Yes.
So that's pretty legit.
Yeah, it is. Pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's rad.
I feel good about it.
You should, man. You should. Okay, so I did very little. I'll get into it in challenges, but if we're tossing out shame and whatnot, shame away. I think the only thing I've actually done in the last 48 hours is I made these insect legs, which took me just a couple minutes because I thought it'd be fun to do wreaths.
I love it. Insect leg laurels. That's great. Yeah.
So, because when you do stuff in film festivals, they give you laurels and whatnot. And I said, everybody's laurels, they don't really match like my style. So, and that's it. And then I've been largely unconscious for the rest of the time.
I love it.
So I didn't do a ton.
I think we might have similar challenges. So why don't we get into it? So challenges. You want to start that off? Or you want me to jump in?
Yeah, I've been sick for a long time, like over a week, and I just haven't had like one of the days where I could have somebody easily cover for me. But I've also been doing intermittent fasting. And I took NyQuil basically on an empty stomach before I went to bed. And so I woke up in the middle of the night throwing up the NyQuil. And then I sent a text to a colleague and said, can you cover my classes? And then I slept till 1 p.m. And then I went to work. So I think that was today.
That's a legit challenge.
I just haven't been awake for enough. I mean, I've been crashing in the evenings. Like I'll get home and I'll help with the kids. And then around like 7:30 or 8 o'clock, I'm just like out.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that's done, but yeah, from a challenge standpoint, I probably should have taken a sick day a couple days ago or a week ago or something, because I just didn't have time, and I think it's made it worse. And working through everything. So
yep, that's a legit challenge. For me, very similar. Yesterday, just stomach issues, like mad stomach issues. So I had to I just went straight to bed when I got home. And then what was worse was, even though I was exhausted because my stomach was all weird, I couldn't sleep. And so I ended up watching like early episodes of like the George Lucas Star Wars episode 1 and 2. Because I was like, I'm going to give these a shot. And of course I got to the romance sequence where he talks about hating sand. And I was like, oh, these are as bad as I remember. However, Ewan McGregor's performance holds up. But anyhow, point being, I was up way too late, feeling really terrible. And I'm trying to ride it out because I have about 2 days left till I have a whole week off. And I don't want to blow my chances at having like a nice vacation by just having like a couple sick days. So I'm trying to kind of coherently get through it. And then I did have band practice tonight, which was pushed from yesterday, which was good because had I not slept, I think I would have but anyhow, I'm definitely sick as well, and not at 100%. And so that's part of why I feel like I didn't really hit my goal. So
yeah, I know what you mean. So for plans, I keep talking about those 2 animations that I haven't been able to get to. I'm kind of making incremental progress on them, but I am going to at least do this tonight. So, which shouldn't take me more than a couple of minutes, but I'm just going to make this paper move up and down. That's pretty much it. So,
nice.
So I'll have something, and then I don't know how much sleep or work or whatever else I'm going to get done, but there's some of that, and then some client work that has come up. Just like the dumb paperwork stuff. So I've got to do some invoicing, which I've been putting off for too long.
Yeah.
And then another one came in that could be a quick turnaround. So I'll probably try to get some of that done. So how about you?
So I would like to have that thumbnailed, the next thing. Minimum, I'd like it thumbnailed. I'd like to at least have like something roughed out, mapped out by the next time. Cool. For that third cover, kind of to make the book consistent and stuff. I also need to start thinking about titles, because I don't know if Quarterly Stories is going to really, I think that would be a better title for like the site that people go to, for maybe the publication. But I feel like there's got to be a more appropriate. I'm almost kind of like into the idea of just calling it 2 stories, because it's all about that juxtaposition of the two, like the childhood story and the adult story. Yeah. And technically, it gets a little more meta than that, because overall it will be 2 graphic novels, and so it could kind of work. But I'm even thinking something possibly less generic. and so that'll be interesting. Uh, Victor was saying his favorite line from episode 1, Star Wars, is sandstorms are very, very dangerous. Yes. Yeah. And episode 2, I had just completely forgotten about the we used to come here when we were kids and play in the sand. I don't like sand.
Yep.
Forgot about that as like the pickup line. And realized like I really got to up my game in romance, because I don't know if I've ever taken that angle.
Yeah. I just think if there were an edit of the prequel trilogy that just involved eliminating anything that Anakin and Padme say to each other at all, at any point, it would be so much better.
You know, weirdly enough, Jar Jar holds up more than the romance lines between Anakin. And Jar Jar really does not hold up, but I'm just saying he holds up more than the romance sequence and the viability of that.
Yeah. That's saying a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so enough Star Wars nerding and all that. Let's get into a topic. You wanted to talk like future of YouTube. I think this is tying into what we were talking about last time. Victor, who's in the chats, sent us a link. I still haven't been able to see the video yet. I sent it to Cory too, so we'll check it out. I guess it's like a lawyer's take on YouTube and like the new policy, and we will, I think, both probably check that out.
Yeah, I've already watched it.
Okay. Was it informative at all?
Very, very informative. Nothing that I didn't already know. But it is a clear explanation of what I feel like is the actual problem, because there are a lot of people that are confusing what is going on with other issues that YouTube has, and that's not the problem. So
sorry, I want to touch on this too. I am thinking about that, like Quarterly Stories Presents or a Quarterly Stories book or something like that. But that's a good point, Victor, about using Quarterly Stories Presents. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and I like. By the way, I like the idea of having Quarterly Stories be more of a brand than the individual book.
Yeah. So now I kind of have to think, what's that book title? We'll talk about that more. I'll probably troubleshoot with you.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be fun. All right, let me play this, and then we'll come back with an intro.
Do it.
All right,
what's the topic?
Today's topic is what is actually happening on YouTube and where to go, what to do. All right, so here's what happened. I teach at a university, and I thought that I would dig and I would find somebody who knows what's going on with this. And so I called up several people who are experts in their field, and they basically all said, "Oh, I would have assumed that you would have been the expert on campus on this particular issue," which was disappointing and surprising. So
it's the highlight of imposter syndrome, though, because it makes sense. We've talked about that ad nauseum, but it is one that is definitely a byproduct of imposter syndrome, where you're like, here's something I probably know a lot about. There must be an expert who has an answer.
Yeah. So denying my own expertise and understanding of what's going on, I don't have a law degree, and I have very little experience with the FTC, but I actually am quite learned and read on several topics that are kind of involved here. So there are a lot of things going on. So to kind of encapsulate this, they're calling it the cop apocalypse. They're calling it the toy apocalypse. There's a bunch of apocalypse suffixes that they're adding to this. But basically, what happened is just a real quick synopsis. In the late 90s, the internet was a thing, right? By then, it had solidly become a thing. And people were terrified back then, because I remember this going on, of your identity being stolen. All of a sudden, there was some kind of electronic access to your personal data in your home. And most people didn't understand what the internet was or what was going on with it. They just knew that it was scary and new. And so the government's reaction to that was to say, children under the age of 13, you can't collect their name or their address or any of their personal data. And that really never really was a problem. Everybody kind of, and that's why, by the way, even today, you can't have a Facebook account if you're under 13. You can't have a YouTube account if you're under 13, because they would have to collect personal data to get you that account. So you have to wait until you're 13 to legally get that, or lie. Now, the problem was, as the internet was coming about, they realized that you can track people's online behavior, and that might be useful. So it started with a lot of the search engines and whatever, but these things called cookies, or what lawyers call, I think, personal identifier or personal electronic identifiers or something. But basically, what sites you've been to and who you are and your location, or the location of the nearest server, or IP location or whatever, that type of thing. There's data that can pinpoint with relative accuracy who you are. But it doesn't necessarily have your name or your physical address or anything like that. So it's not technically collecting the data that was legally written in that privacy protection. They amended that to say cookies are also included. You can't collect cookies. And everyone went along their merry way. And nobody really enforced it. The EU began about a year or two ago to start kind of raising a stink about cookies. And that's why most websites nowadays that you go on have a warning that says, we are collecting cookies. Are you cool with this? Yes or no? And you have to click yes to make it go away. And there's a lot of those types of things that those have kind of started. And I'll get more into the history of that in a minute. But recently, yeah, Y2K. Y2K has nothing to do with this, but this does. No, it does tie in because of the reaction that people had to Y2K.
Yeah.
Speaks to kind of the mentality of the populace at the time. Yeah. So as a zeitgeist, Y2K was fascinating because basically some programmer came out and they said, oh crap, like in the 80s and the 90s when we started writing all these things, we didn't think this through, that the date was going to change from an 199 something to a 200 something. And so they said, oh, that's going to like mess it up. That translated into everyone assuming all kinds of things. I literally remember people thinking that their microwaves were going to explode.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that their appliances were going to come to life or blow up.
News articles about people like spending their life savings on like bunkers and end of the world apocalypse preparations because Y2K was just going to crush and destroy the world. Yeah.
And so that's the mentality. I'm glad that they brought up Y2K, because that's the mentality and the understanding of what was going on. Like even as a teenager, I was listening to all of these news reporters that with a straight face were saying like, is your microwave safe? Will Y2K your electricity? And I'm like, my microwave does not have an internet connection. It doesn't even know what date it is.
Yeah, like stoplights will stop working.
Yeah, things that
grid.
Well before the internet ever existed, all of a sudden everybody's like, your refrigerator is going to explode. There was all kinds of really stupid stories about how everything would just break down because everything runs on computers now. This is 1999. Everything did not run on computers. Banks, you still had to walk into your bank and talk to a human being to see what your balance on your checking account was, or go and physically put your card into a thing and touch metal numbers so that a TV CRT screen could show you what your balance was. That's how technologically advanced it was when everybody was worried that Y2K was going to end the world. And so that's the mentality of all this. And so people just didn't understand what was going on, and fear kind of pervaded the lack of knowledge. The same thing is happening now, where people are just terrified about what's going on, because all we have right now is two statements, one from YouTube, one from the FTC. Both include, as a professional communicator, as somebody who teaches communications at a collegiate level, I can tell you both include intentionally vague and indefinable language.
Yeah, ambiguous communication, which is a real red flag for people who are fans of communication, because if somebody's being ambiguous, and keep in mind, everything both of those organizations are putting out has been run through legalese, like law departments. So if their lawyers thought they should be ambiguous with things that could potentially be really bad for the creator, that does bode fairly badly for who is being communicated to.
Right, because depending on your worldview, you could assume some either inept or nefarious intentions there, and I tend to go with nefarious, but inept is also in there. but so now here's what's happened is the FTC, not the FCC, because most people are confusing this issue. Most people are confusing the issue with the type of content that is being presented. That is not the problem, and the FTC does not care what type of content is being presented. YouTube, aka Google, aka Alphabet, or whoever is actually at the top of that organization, they have spun this, as they always do. They have spun this into being a content issue. It is not a content issue. The issue is as simple as this: it is illegal to collect personalized data of human beings who are under the age of 13 years old.
Fair. Yeah.
That's the problem. That's the only thing that's happening right now, legally. Yeah. Now, what YouTube has done is they were hit by the FTC, and the FTC said, you are not following the law. You have become like the place for Saturday morning cartoons. You have become what TV used to be. And TV has been heavily regulated on what they can show and what they can't show. And advertisers on those networks and on those cable channels are heavily regulated on what they're allowed to show and what they can't show based on the type of programming, because of the assumption of who is watching the programming. Yeah. That is a content issue. But what YouTube is doing is they are collecting data of everybody who is on their website. And they are collecting that personalized data, and they are using that to sell advertising to people. But it's not even the ads that are the problem. It is the collection of that data.
Yeah.
And so when it comes down to it, YouTube refuses to stop collecting that data. So much so that the problem would completely 100% go away if I were just to be able to click a thing on my channel and say, do not collect any data of anyone who is watching these. I don't want any personalized data. I just want to know how many computers have viewed this video and for how long. Yeah. And I don't want any other personalized data. If I was able to check that, then my channel would be completely safe. But YouTube does not give you that option. Or YouTube is actually
just to say not to do that on anyone who's 13 or younger. And that would be more clear and unambiguous, because you could just say, don't collect data of anyone who's 13 or under.
The irony of that, though, is that they can't do that without knowing the person's age, and knowing the person's age is a piece of privacy.
Yeah.
And there's no way to do that accurately without being massively invasive. Now, if the government said any computer that is accessing the internet must have a camera, and that camera must be enabled, and that anybody who sits down to use a device to access the internet must first verify through facial recognition their age, people would freak out, because that's a massive violation of privacy. Yeah. That is probably one of the only ways, other than maybe a fingerprint or some sort of like very personal information, to say, you know who I am. I am citizen number 5752 or whatever, right? Then they could accurately say, okay, so this person is, we know who this individual is. We're not going to collect any data. But YouTube will not ever do that, because Google, early on during the tech boom, was coming out and they were blowing up, right? Because everybody before Google, all the search engines before search engines, the internet was a mess. You had to know exactly where you were going. They didn't have HTTP : and then sort of www. It was just like you typed in the ISP of the computer you were trying to access.
And if you have that, even early iterations of search engines, it's basically like if you were chatting or you were searching, you were only searching within the framework of that search engine. So like chat rooms were, Yahoo chat rooms or whatever, and most results were still kind of vetted through that search engine. It's hard to kind of explain that to people who are used to Google, which is so phenomenal, which you just immediate results that span every ISP online,
Right, because prior to this, there were, for lack of a better term, semi-closed networks of information. And so you would go to Yahoo and you got Yahoo stuff. You would go to GeoCities and you got GeoCities stuff. Yeah. If your friend, like my friend, made a website and I made a website, and we could go directly to those websites because we knew the address. But I mean, he literally hosted his website on his computer from home and just broadcast it because he turned his computer into the server. Yeah. Very few people could do that in 94, 95 when we were doing this, right? And so beyond that, though, then you got Ask Jeeves, then you got Hotbot, Yahoo started to be a thing, but they were all cluttered messes, just giant. I mean, from a design standpoint, just horribly cluttered. And then Google came out and they just said, what if we could index everything? We just be the index for the internet. Yeah. And so they created these spiders, these bots that would crawl across the internet and find anything that existed and make it searchable. And they did that. And what they found was that to do that accurately, they had to collect data from people, and they would collect data on predictive data. They would try to predict what the end of your sentence was going to be, what it was that you were searching. They tried to get all this information. And then there's a guy who, by the way, I believe is now the one who runs Pokemon Go, which is fascinating. There is a guy who they started to see what they call data exhaust. So they had all this searches, and their goal was to just help people search the internet and to find what they wanted. That was what Google did. That was what they were. What happened is then the tech bubble began to burst. Okay. And so prior to this burst, angel investors and venture capitalists, people with huge amounts of money, were spending huge amounts of money in a stupid way to get in on this boom, because everybody was starting up all this stuff, and just, everybody, they'd start a company, and if it was in Silicon Valley and it was, by some dude that looked like he was 22 or whatever, it must be good. So they're just throwing millions of dollars at this. And then all of a sudden, these companies started failing. Investors started losing their money. And the investors came to Google and said, hey, you got to start making money. And so there became this exception where they betrayed their core principles. Yeah. And they said, we've got to figure out a way to make money, like fast. Like they had a business model that was incredible in that, in what it was doing was great, but it was terrible in that what it was doing was not profitable.
Yeah, there was no return. Yeah.
So then there was this guy who said, well, we've got all this data exhaust, which we now call personalized data. We've got user behavior. I bet that we could take that user behavior and sell it to advertisers and then place ads. They had this big argument, and a lot of people were really up in arms about whether or not people were paying for ranked places on the Google searches and whatever. And so they made it very clear where the advertising sections were and where they weren't, blah, 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 blah. So they turned into a company that collected people's data and sold it. MySpace came around, came and went. Facebook, same thing, showed up and overtook MySpace because MySpace was a clustered design mess, no negative space, and it was horrible. And they gave users the ability to create basically whatever they wanted, and by design, everything looked like just a spinning, glittery, rotated GIF with horrible music blasting at you whenever you.
Like, there was actually too much freedom in MySpace, weirdly enough, for it to be as successful as Facebook. Facebook had more limitations within the build and design of it, and that made it succeed, like a lot of things.
Right. And so Facebook came along and did the same thing Google did and said, clean interface, lots of negative space, white and blue, very simple. And it just blew up. It just blew up. And then they saw what Google was doing, and they're like, oh, what's so great? And there's quotes from Zuckerberg about this. Before Google and Facebook realized that they should like couch what they're doing in like double speak, they were very clear about what they're doing. And Zuckerberg said that the best thing about what's going on right now is that we can sell people's personalized data, and we have better data because people voluntarily give us more data than YouTube can steal from people. Yeah. Basically, the idea is you go in there and you're so excited about what movies you like and what books you read and how old you are and what religion you are and your political affiliation, and play all these little games where you answer all of these psychological questions about yourself. They have tons of psychographic and demographic information that we have volunteered on that site, and they have turned that around and started selling that to advertisers. This is the problem with COPPA. It is not whether or not your content is appropriate for children. It's not whether your content is safe for work. It is not whether your content has action figures or not. What it is that Google, YouTube, Facebook, a lot of the tech companies refuse to change their business models to adapt to the times, because we are becoming more aware that we're not okay with having our personalized data bought and sold without our consent. Because statistically speaking, every time people start to realize, are informed about how much data is being collected about them, they are like 70-80% of them are 100% against it, right? Not even wishy-washy, like, oh, it makes me a little uncomfortable. They're just like, no, that's not okay. And so that's kind of where we are. That's what's actually going on, is that Google is saying, we're not going to change. We are going to continue to mine this data. We're going to continue to do this. And there's nothing that you guys can do to stop us because we are Google.
And then here's the catch, is if you opt out, like, let's say you choose an option on your YouTube channel that's like, I'm just not participating in that. The issue with that is the algorithm that enables searchability on YouTube or on Google is all pulling from data, right? From data collection. So if you're saying, don't collect my data, then when that bot is going around, that spider or whatever you want to call it, is going around collecting all that data, all those tags and stuff like that, and adding it to the search engine, you've just opted out. So you're completely negating the possibility of anybody really outside of your own peer circle really viewing or seeing what you do. Whereas if you opt in, now you're opting into liability as well. Because if that thing is like, hunting and it happens to be like a 13-year-old's computer, now you're liable for that search engine going to that person's computer. That is a conundrum. That's
right. Because right now, the question that YouTube is asking us as creators to make is your content intended for children or not? The real question that the FTC cares about is, would you like us to continue to collect personalized data on people that are watching your videos or not? But that's not the question that YouTube is asking us to make. Basically, what they're saying is we are not legally responsible. We've paid our $170 million fine. We are not going to pay $42,000 per video that's an infraction with this. And so what we've done is we told the FTC, we'll just let the consumer or the creators self-regulate. And for some reason, the FTC was like, fine, whatever, I don't care. Like, we'll just sue whoever we're going to sue. And so we're in a situation now where by continuing to use YouTube, I have a choice to make of whether I risk the random attacks of the government on my content. We talked about that on Monday, where like I have there right here. There it is. There's action figures in the back, right? I've got comic books over here. You could say that my shirt currently is a comic book style. Maybe there's just something about Josh that kids like. I don't know what it is, but the language is so unclear that if your video could appeal to children or could cause children to be interested in your content, then I mark it as not for children, meaning I allow YouTube to continue to collect personalized data and sell that. And by allowing that, I'm still searchable. I still have functionality in my content and everything. Then I get fined $42,000 per video that they decide randomly. Is for children. And if I choose that it is for children, then not because YouTube has to, but because they want to discourage me from making that choice, they basically shut down all of the useful functionality of my channel.
It is an interesting conundrum, and I think we might have different tendencies with this. Like, to me, if you look at the FCC and their attack on music, especially in the 1980s, early 1990s, there could be some bands that were just like, we're never going to use language in our music. We're going to play it squeaky clean because we don't want to get slapped with a fine and have to testify in front of Congress about like why our music isn't brainwashing people to like commit ritual murder or whatever. Because, and it really is worth looking into, because that literally happened. Our government literally brought rock and roll bands to Congress to explain why their music wasn't inciting kids to commit suicide. Like, that actually happened. Like, they blamed the death of kids on music. And then, I mean, there were like parental advisories and stuff like that had to be placed on albums just to limit liability. But the point being, like, what do you do if you're that band or if you're a content creator in that field and the government's got its, like, you know, sights on you? And my tendency is just to be like, screw it. Like, you got to write your music. You got to kind of make your stuff and let the chips fall where they may. And that's easier said than done. But to me, I don't know. I do kind of think I think it might be apropos that Victor was bringing up like Y2K. It might be a similar scenario where this is like a new thing, and generally like new policies and stuff like that are really ambiguous and everybody freaks out and reposts their paragraph that on Facebook, like, you know, this paragraph protects me from getting my data collected, or whatever, you know. So I don't know. It's hard to say. And I think this is a good point where Salazar was saying all my videos can be considered for children. I draw on most of my videos. I don't curse or draw anything risque that can be appealing to kids. I've marked my own videos as like not for children, but I'm not nervous about children seeing my stuff because I don't feel like I'm doing anything really. Like I think if you had to like give my stuff like a rating, it wouldn't be anything above PG.
Yeah,
hits some heavy topics, you know. So I'm like It's a Wonderful Life dealt with like mental illness and suicide, and that was, you know, that's considered family, you know, story. So,
and that's where here's the thing is that the tech companies have consistently done nefarious, underhanded, illegal, evil things. And then when they get caught doing it, they reframe the conversation as if it's something else. And that's what's happening right here. And so we can go back to whether or not your channel is intended for children or not. But the fact of the matter is that's not what's going on. That's the choice that we are being forced to make right now.
But that sidesteps the core issue. Yeah.
Yeah. But the core issue is that I believe that the government and people at large are sick of having their content or having their personalized data bought and sold without their consent.
Yeah.
And largely without their knowledge.
Yeah.
I've talked about this in the past, but there have been journalists that have gone undercover to listen to like Alexa, you know, and because they have farms of people, right? And I'm saying this as somebody who I have Alexa, like I have you know, a smart speaker in most of the rooms in my home, just because. And so like I'm saying that as somebody who has this in their home. But the where was I going with that? Oh, he went undercover they employ human beings to listen to conversations to try to depict whether or not to determine whether or not their smart speaker is accurate, you know, is actually like you know, listening well or whatever.
Yeah.
And in theory, what we're told that those smart speakers only listen when you say the wake word, when you say Alexa or Hey Google or whatever it is that we're supposed to say. But in actuality, what's happening is they listen all the time, and that data is being categorized. That data is being listened to, and I'm certain that data is being bought and sold. And I've had people that have done experiments. For example, there's a friend of mine who just went in, I believe, I can't remember who this was, but just went into the desert and just like turned off all their phones, left their phones in the car, and then just continued to mention the name of a product over and over again in normal conversation, just kept talking about a product just to test if this would happen. And what happened when they got back home is they started seeing ads for that product.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not exactly sure how that's happening, and it sounds like super weird conspiracy theory type thing, but just think about this. Like when you start seeing things that you are talking about, how is that happening?
Yeah. And I mean, I've definitely experienced that where I'll be sick or something. I'm just like message my wife, yeah, I'm sick, like whatever. And then I get home and every social media account has an ad for like cold medicine.
Yeah.
It's very strange. I think that I think that is disturbing. I think it's hard to know how to get out of that scenario.
I don't think getting out is the problem. So we don't. It's a new dichotomy, and the idea is that if we apply old logic to new things, then what will happen is that it won't make any sense. Like, for example, an example given in the book, what is that book? Surveillance Capitalism, is when the Incans and the Mayans saw Captain Cook show up on their shores, they applied what they understood from the past to this unprecedented event, which is these pale-skinned, shiny, glowing, glittery Spaniards showing up on their shores. They'd never seen people that looked like this. They'd never seen armor that looked like that before. They had never seen ships that looked like that before. And so instead of saying, this is unprecedented, we need to invent new language and new concepts and new dichotomies and new paradigms to understand what's going on, they said, well, these must be gods.
Yeah.
They bowed down and worshipped them.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I think there are some ideas out there that I think are interesting. Like, for instance, I mean, data mining, as you kind of explained very, very well, it's kind of fundamental to a functional search engine on any platform.
Yep.
And the selling of that is problematic, but also sustains most of those platforms. So there are some theories that I think are pretty interesting, which is if people are profiting off of selling your data, you should actually get a cut of it, like equivalent to like if you have a script and you sell it, you get points on whatever film is made from that script. Like, getting points on your own data might be some kind of solution to it, because if there's value to your data and it's your data, you should definitely have some kind of legal recourse to profit or a piece of that profit. I don't think that would be a solution, but I think that's at least somewhat forward thinking.
Yeah.
With the issue, because it's definitely something we're not necessarily going to be able to walk out of. But it is something to be aware of. And I do feel like it's becoming a problem almost equivalent to like Monsanto, where if you ever want to go down like a Google rabbit hole that'll bug you, just read about Monsanto and try to not buy Monsanto for like a month. I have, and most people I know have, when they've found out about Monsanto and read about them, they're like, oh, this corporation's completely evil. We got to stop buying Monsanto products. And then you quickly, within a month, find out it's physically impossible, because they have their fingers in everything. Like everything that's made and produced, like 95% of it has something Monsanto in it.
Yeah.
I think it's an equivalent kind of issue where it's like, I don't know if there's a way to kind of completely cease. But
yeah, it's interesting because I used to be, and to a certain extent, in certain limited areas, I used to be a free market capitalist. And the general idea of that is, that the invisible guiding hand of self-interest will govern the market, and that the government shouldn't try to regulate things. It's a good concept until you begin to understand externalities.
Yeah.
And an externality is this. The basic idea is, in a perfectly free market system, a company, their own selfishness would drive them to do the best thing for the community, because to do otherwise would hurt their profit, and they don't want to hurt their profit. And so their own selfishness drives them towards actions that is good for the community. And if you take like economics in that instance, people are seeking to buy the highest quality product for the lowest price, and companies seeking to sell the lowest quality product or the least expensive product to produce at the highest price. And because there's self-interest that is conflicting on either side of that transaction, where those meet is an automatic setting where the market dictates the price.
Yeah.
So the supply and demand dictate the price, and people have an option to choose between, I'm going to pay less and get a lower quality, I'm going to pay more and get a higher quality, or I'm not going to buy that product until they lower the price. And they lower the price and the market self-adjusts. That's great until you realize that an externality could come into play, where in the production of that product, that company could dump toxic waste into a river.
Mm-hmm.
And that river could flow away from the town where they're selling that product into the next town where they have no customers. That externality is that next town. They don't care about that town. So they poison the water supply of the town next to them because it doesn't affect their bottom line. Everybody's still happy about it. And maybe even they get a better quality product for a lower price because, they get to dump this waste or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that externality needs to be regulated for the greater good of society. And so there is some room for regulation.
Oh, and yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple other externalities that are great in that exact scenario where it's like, or you become the product that's so popular that when a competitor comes into the market, you can just pay off hitmen to take them out, so you can actually create a monopoly. So in that case, anti-monopoly or causes like kind of provide for a free market as well. And this is definitely delving into that kind of territory where it's like there's definitely a privacy invasion issue.
Mm-hmm.
That is an externality that we really need to start thinking about potential solutions for. But it's definitely a complicated and webbed issue, not like a black and white.
Yeah, because I mean, beyond that, you've got all kinds of things that are kind of coming into play here, along those lines. But when something unprecedented shows up and you apply old rules to it, you are going to get conquered. I mean, the language that the tech companies are using is the language of conquering nations, is the language of colonialism, is the language of conquistadors. It's the language of inevitability. And when you begin to believe that this type of progress is inevitable, then you stop defending against it and you begin to say, well, it's just inevitable. It's just the natural drift of inevitability. Well, I'll tell you what else is inevitable is slavery is inevitable. Does that mean that we shouldn't fight against it? Because if I'm some evil company, and this is not unheard of, this happened recently, and continues to happen in parts of the world today, where people say, "Hey, you know who is a lot less expensive than adults? Kids, and they actually work better in my factory because their hands are small, and there's a lot of them, and so
days,
Yeah, I mean, I'll just have them, fix the machines and stuff. And if every once in a while they lose a hand or whatever, I mean, they're kids. Who cares? At one point in time in London, there were so many orphans dropped off at the church doorsteps that the church would rent out the orphans to chimney sweeps because they were small and they were disposable. They had no parents. And no one really cared about them. And so they would just use them as a something to be used up. Yeah. And so they would just take these kids and they would shove them down the chimneys until they got black lung and died. And then they would just rent a new kid from the church. It's kind of a similar issue. If you say that profit is the only thing that drives companies, and that we should not regulate things to the point where and I have huge problems with regulation because I don't trust the government to do things well, and they are inept or whatever. But in certain instances, you have to have some sort of regulating body step in. The problem is that the tech companies are largely unregulated on this issue. They're largely unregulated, and even the regulation that they are trying to enforce, that the FTC is trying to enforce right now, is so outdated that it predates the existence of YouTube. Well, YouTube did not exist when this law was written.
It's equivalent to like if you have like a 19th century detective trying to deal with a 20th century criminal.
Yeah, somebody who's doing like identity fraud and cybersecurity, and you put Sherlock Holmes on it.
Yeah, exactly. So they're pulling out like the magnifying glass when you're doing things that are untraceable by like old technology, and that's kind of a scenario we're in where it's like the regulators, if they're out of touch with what they're actually regulating, you're going to have some massive issues. Like bringing back the poisoning the the water supply kind of issue. If they're not even aware that what's being poured into the water is poison, then how are the regulators in that scenario going to do any good? Or if they assume that the filter, let's say the company is like, oh, well, we'll take care of it, and they install a filter that doesn't work, but the regulators are scientifically idiotic and don't realize it doesn't actually prevent the waste from getting in the water. That's kind of the scenario we're in, where it's like a really bad, really kind of impotent filter being added to try to filter out a poison that's continually still flowing into the river. It's fascinating. We're almost at an hour. So I think we're going to have to wrap it. But I kind of want to figure out like how this will apply. How does this apply to us? Like, is there anything we can do at this point?
Yes, there's one major thing that you can do, and I don't have the link ready, but I will put it in the notes of this. And if you follow me on Twitter, I'll post it on Twitter as well. But one of the major things that you can do is that the FTC has opened up commenting up till December 9th, and they will take comments on this issue.
Good.
The problem is oftentimes when people jump in and do this, they do it in an angry way, and it's really easy to discount anger because it seems emotional and irrational. And so I just recommend that the thing that we can do right now is calmly explain that whether the content is intended for children or not is not actually the problem. The problem is that YouTube, Google, is collecting private data of its users without properly regulating that. The issue is not whether or not I have an action figure, whether or not I animate cartoons. The issue is the fact that privatized data is massively unregulated, and it continues to be a problem whether or not I leave the channel. Because right now I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but this could be a turning point for a number of things, because even if I left YouTube, pretty much anywhere where I can house my video content online is going to collect privatized data.
Yeah, and they're going to be following suit because YouTube is kind of the leader in this kind of thing, and usually all the social media platforms kind of follow the leader.
Right. And so, I mean, if I jump to Instagram and I start live streaming on Instagram and everybody jumps to IGTV, that is not going to solve the problem, because Facebook, the owner of Instagram, is just as complicit in the illegal data collection of minors as Google and YouTube are.
Well, and then, here's another conundrum is like once again, if it's about whether you're making content for kids or not, like once again, it's just the wrong acronym. It's the wrong acronym. It's like one letter away or whatever. So I mean, if it were the FCC, that might be a different issue, but the Federal Trade Commission really shouldn't be dictating unless you're selling.
The Federal Trade Commission is not dictating this.
Yeah.
This is YouTube is saying that they had to do this in their agreement with the Federal Trade Commission. That is not the case.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, if YouTube said, we will stop collecting personalized data, or we will limit it to this amount of data, or we will stay away from this type of thing, we won't have persistent cookies that travel beyond our website, in any number of concessions that they could have made, the FTC would have said, sounds great. Because that's the only thing that the FTC actually has a legal thing to care about, is the collection of this private data.
Exactly.
In fact, what YouTube did is they said, we'll just put it on our creators. We're not going to stop doing this. And so we'll just make it so that the creators have to self-regulate. And the FTC, for whatever reason, said, fine, that's fine, whatever, because it feels inevitable. It feels inevitable that technology has advanced to the point where we just have to collect people's data, or else what will we do? I don't know. We will continue to function with new and innovative ways of doing things without selling the privatization of everybody's personal lives and eliminating the ability to have sanctuary in our lives. Like, we have nowhere where we can go and be by ourselves. We have no private place that isn't tracked and sold. And if you want to figure out what is going on, if you want to figure out what is going on with social media and tech companies right now, you are not their consumer. Yeah. You are not their customer. You are not their product.
Yeah.
You are the mountain that is being strip mined, and your data is the ore that is being sold. Yep. They don't care how the mountain feels as long as there's still ore there.
Yep. I love it. That's so dark. Let's leave it on that. Let's leave it dark. So, all right, my data minds out there. I hope you guys have been enjoying this. I actually think it's really interesting, and I think it ties in a lot to that's funny. Sorry, Victor's chiming in with a lot of really interesting experiences, and he did kind of wrap it well, basically saying it'll be interesting seeing what happens in January. But yeah, a lot of great stuff in the chats. Thanks to everybody who joined us. Cory, while you're online still, where can everybody find your stuff?
You can continue to find me at corykerr.com, which is a site that I own. That is my domain, and I do not track your data other than basic analytics. And I definitely don't sell your data to third parties.
Yes. And yeah, you can check out my stuff at joshuakemble.com. And quarterlystories.com will take you directly to the comic I do about faith and mental illness. And I don't collect or sell your data either, just basic analytics. But if I knew how, I might, because it sounds like you make a ton of money on it. But I definitely don't, because I'm just not that smart. So anyhow, we will probably talk to you guys next time if we're still around, and we're not. You know,
I'm planning on being around, and I'm gonna fight tooth and nail to figure out some kind of solution. I don't know what it is, but there's something has to happen there. This is a turning point.
Yeah.
And whether this is a turning point of the next 5 years or the next 2 months, I don't know. But this is an untenable situation.
And I think there is a key thing to there is something to be said for just the knowledge of something. Like, even if there's a wrong occurring, or maybe it's not wrong, but at least knowing it's occurring, I think, is the beginning of something. Because, once again, it's like the Monsanto thing, where it's like, you may not be able to stop buying all Monsanto products, but being aware of like how messed up their farming policies are might curb your buying habits a little bit. In a positive way that'll have more of an impact. So in general, I don't think it's wrong. Does Scott sell your data? We got to ask Scott. I don't know.
We'll have to ask him. But if he does, he's probably only selling it to those that are trying to take over the world.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. It's a good plot. All right. We will see you guys next week. Also, on Artcasters tomorrow, we're having Eric Fan, one of the Fan brothers, who are like amazing illustrators, on to interview, and I'm pretty excited about that. And then we will see you guys probably on Monday. So talk to you later. Bye.